Hi everyone, my name is Eileen Hull. I am a licensed artist with Sizzix, and some people ask me how I got started in that. Well, I started out matting and framing when my husband was in the military, and when I would go over to the craft shop and start matting and framing, and then I would have all this cool leftover mat board. So I started to cut and fold and score and make little boxes and books and folders, but the problem was that you had to have an accurate cut every time, which didn't happen. And also you had to measure everything a million times before you got the same one. So I went to Sizzix and I said, is there any way you could make a die that would cut and score a thick material, and then you'd have a nice perfect cut every time? So they agreed to investigate that, and they went ahead and did it, and now I have a line of dies called scoreboards, which are great because they're exclusive to Sizzix. They're the only company that makes anything like that. And I think I have 78 products in line right now, so there's a nice selection of everything that you can imagine. They're great for parties, for if you need to make 100 for a wedding, or just a single. But I try to design so that you can use something in more than one way, and I think that you'll see that in some of these classes that we're about to do. The project that we're going to do today is called the mini album, and we're going to learn how to use Color Box Blends inks to get a nice background, and then we're going to take some embossing paste from Wendy Vecchi and add that to it, and you will learn how to cut the die and how to make pages using the same die. The first thing that you'll need is the mini album die from Sizzix. It's an XL die, and you will need to have the extended cutting pads to use this. Next, you're going to need some mat board. I'm going to use the cream color, but it also is available in black and white. Then we're going to use a mover and shaper die to cut a hole or a window into the cover of the album. We'll be using my new Color Box Blends inks from Clear Snap to create the background. We'll be using some embossing paste, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's get started with the cutting. I love this die because it has a lot of different ways that you can use it. Because this is a scoreboard, if you look at the die, on the outside are the cutting lines, and right here are where you have the scoring lines. So this album has an adjustable binding. So you can make your album either 1 1/8 inch thick, or if you fold it on the smaller on the inside score lines, you can make a 3/8 inch album if you just have a quick and easy project. So I'm going to open up some mat board. You only need one piece for this. One of the other features of this die is that it has this mover and shaper that you can use to cut a window in there. When I first heard about these movers and shapers, I could not figure out how they worked. So basically, there's a magnetic section in here, and then this is a mover and shaper, which has a magnet also. So you just stick it where you want. If you want your hole in your window in the middle, you do it there. If you want it in the corner, you put it there. So I'm just going to do one to show you how it works. This piece down here is for the closure. So we're going to cut the whole thing. When you're doing it, you want to make sure that you cover all of the cut areas of the die. So most of them are designed to fit 12 inches, so you can use it with 12-inch paper. So I'm just making my sandwich. I'm using my bottom cutting pad, the die, the mat board, and then another cutting pad on top. Now, if you wanted to cover this with paper, you would do that before. What I do is I'll take half a sheet of 12 by 12 paper, cut it in half, and then I put adhesive on the back and adhere it to the mat board, then I cut it so that you get a nice clean cut. So we don't have that right now. So I'm going to roll this through my Big Shot. You're going to hear those noises, that's okay. The other thing that you can do with mat board, which people don't realize, is that you can emboss it. So we'll do that in a minute. So here's our little cutout. Here's our little closure, and here is the window. So you're just going to pop that out, and now you have an album. So before we, sometimes the rubber gets stuck in there. So we're going to now ink this using Color Box Blends inks. So I'm going to put down my nonstick mat. Oops. Okay. So the way that the blends work, oh, it matches me. Basically, the way these got started was I was in the dollar store and I was buying Christmas presents for my kids' stockings. I have 2 kids in the military, and I saw these cool shoe polishers, and I got some, and then I started thinking, that would be cool if that had ink in it. So I went to ClearSnap, and they said, hey, that's a good idea. So here they are. They come in 10 colors, and there's 10 times as much ink as there is in a stamp pad in each blends. The way you start them is you snap them open like that, like you're snapping a carrot. And then when you get it, you're going to have a white sponge, and then you have to prime it. There's a little valve in the middle, and every time you press it down, you're going to get a dot of ink. So here's how it works. So what I do is I'll do a couple little dots of ink, and then I rub it in a circle, rotate it so that it's covering the whole surface of the sponge there. So you can get it real inked up or just light. I like to start light and then add color because you can always add it, but you can't take it away. So the way I did this album here was basically I just took all different colors and I swirled them and blended them together. So I'll show you how it works. You just take it and start making little circles, and these little variations are kind of cool. And then I'm going to add another color. Let's add some yellow. And then I'll start that next to it so you can see how the colors blend into each other. The other good thing is you don't have to put the cap on every time. This is a pigment-based ink, so you don't have to worry about them drying out if you leave the cap off, which is good for me because I do it all the time. Okay. So basically you're going to do this over your whole color, and for the sake of the video not taking a long time, I have one that I did for that already. Okay, so same idea. Now this one I did not cut the window in, but I wanted to show you how that works. So let's say now this is done. We'll put our inks away. The next thing that we're going to do is add some texture paste to the top. All right, here it is. This is a brand new stencil from Stencil Girl, and I love it. It's a very delicate rose pattern. So one thing to remember is you have to wash it right away. So I have some baby wipes here. I'm going to do that because if not, you can see that they're very intricate cuts here, and so if you leave your embossing paste on there, it's going to clog them up and you won't get a good impression. So I'm going to take a scrap piece of mat board and I'm going to use that as my spatula, and I'm going to get just a little bit of the embossing paste on here, place my stencil on top. I'm not going to do it on the binding because you won't see it, it will be covered. And then you just, it's really fun. It's like icing a cake. If you need a little more, you can go get it. You can really see where you have not done because it's lighter, darker where you haven't done. Take a little more. And even it out. And then very carefully lift it off. And you can see you have a real pretty texture on top there. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side too, and then I'm going to clean it off. And if you want to get artsy, you can maybe just do some sections of it. You don't have to fill it all in. There we go. Now you're going to find that you'll have these little extra pieces on the side here, so I just kind of scoop them up. And you can take them with your hand. Now if you wanted, you also could do your color inside the album, but that one I think was sitting on some ink, so that got colored. So I'm going to just clean up this area and then I want to show you how that we're going to use that die, the same die, to cut pages. Okay, now I want to show you one of the beautiful things about this die. A lot of people say, oh great, you can make a mini album, but what about the pages? Well, I'm going to show you how to make pages that will perfectly fit inside your album. So what I've done, now you could use a 12 by 12 sheet of paper. If you do that, you just take it, fold it in half, fold it into quarters, and then you're going to lay this right below the fold here and run it through. That will give you 2 signatures of paper. What I have today is just a plain 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock. So I've cut that, so this is 11 inches. You don't have to worry because this is a 5-inch album, so you're going to have a little extra all around. So I have taken 3. You can cut 3 at a time, probably even 4 if you stretched it, if you want it, but 3 is pretty good for me. So I'm going to take 3 sheets of these pages and I'm going to line them up right before the fold. If you put them above the fold, you might cut them. You don't want to do that. So I'm just going to lay them down here. And I'm going to use my shorter plate because it's easier to hold that in position. And I'm going to roll that back. Now you could use the open end too, but it's easier to have that whole flat part. Okay, so here you go. You have 3 separate signatures for your book. So I'll show you how we put that on, and I'm hoping that our album is dry enough. So now we have our signatures, and now we're going to use rubber bands to bind our album. This is so quick and easy. You can make albums in no time. So what I'm going to do is just line this up, and I'm going to try and keep away from the cover, so if it's still wet, it's not going to hurt. Okay, so here we go. And then what you're going to do is just keep loading these pages on until you have as many as you want. One of the good things about it is that if, say, you put a page in there and then you decide you don't like it in that place, a lot of albums you have to take the whole thing out and start over and rearrange your pages. This one, you just pull it out, put it where you want it. So as you can see, we're going to have a nice little binding here, and I usually do about 8 to 10 pages if I'm doing the thicker binding. Now let me show you how this is nice and dry actually, and that was just a couple minutes. So what I do when I am working with a scoreboard die is that I will take this and lay it on a straight edge right here, like the edge of a table, and I fold it over. So let's do this thicker binding for this project. The reason is that if you start folding here and you bend it over, sometimes you're going to tear that part of the paper. It'll start to separate. So when you fold it all at one time, it's a lot better. So as you can see, we have this nice thick binding here. So as you can see how many that you want to fit in here. Now, if you're going to do a dimensional album, you're going to have maybe some 3D flowers popping up or whatever, you can do as many pages as you want. So you just load them on like that, and now we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so while we have our inks out, let me just show you how you can make custom ribbon using your color box blends and a little bit of water. I have dotted these inks out just a little bit here and added some color, and then I'm just going to take a mister and add a little bit of water, and then you're going to drag your ribbon through, and it's going to be custom colored to match your album. You might want to add a little more water. This is good, then this can dry in the meantime. And you might have to add a little bit more ink too. Now, if these inks get contaminated, say you use the yellow and then you did brown, you went over brown, just take a little piece of paper towel, or you can use your baby wipes, wipe it off, and then give it a couple more pumps, and you're good to go. I'm making a big mess, but you get the idea. Actually, I'm just going to make a real big mess. Why not? Oops. This is the fun part. Okay, I'm just going to dunk this all in here. I think you'll be be surprised at how pretty. Even if there is a little bit of white, that's okay too. Okay, so now we have some ribbon. I'm going to put that aside to dry. Now we're going to emboss our little label part here. This is one of my new dies that will come out with the Vintage Kitchen line, and it's called Waffle, and I modeled it after the old vintage bakeware. So now we're going to emboss our mat board. What I'm doing is I'm putting in my platform. You don't need any tabs because mat board is already thick. You don't need to give it any extra depth. And you're just going to take your piece and put it inside your folder. Doesn't really matter where. You put it on your platform, cover it with your short plate so you don't have to roll it through too many times. You will notice a little bit, it takes a little more pressure to roll it through, but it works fine. And there you go. Isn't that cute? And you could emboss, or you could ink that if you wanted, or add color, spray it, but I kind of like it white because it adds some nice contrast to the cover of my album. Now what I did on this one was I used my inks again to just ink up this little square that fits inside. I'm not going to do that in the video. This is already crazy, but that's how I would do it. And then we just inked our ribbon here, so that's how you would tie it together. And then the other things that I did was I took a little strip of metal and I used a metal punch and stamped out art. And then I took a little bit of black paint, put it in the, well, I covered it with black paint, and then I rubbed it off. The other thing that we are going to do, or that we need to do, is add a closure to the album. So I inked that also. Now this is adjustable, so you have to decide before you put this piece on, do you want to use it thick, thin, how full will your album be? Because that's where you want to position your back piece. If you think it's going to be thick, I would move this over this way and then put your eyelet and secure the back of the closure to the album. And then on the front, I just used a little piece of Velcro. I really like this stuff because it's nice and it has a really good grip. And this is what I used. I only used a half. And then I used that to open and close it. And then I just added a decorative button on the front, and there you have a nice little album. So I think you can see that there are a lot of possibilities to use this. In here I just did some different embossing folders, but these are great for photos or for your art journal, whatever you want to put in here. Just your little thoughts on whatever.